I'm Rebecca Martinez, 32 years old, a freelance graphic designer who turned my late grandmother's forgotten house into my dream home office. Every cracked wall I fixed, every room I painted, every dollar I invested, it all came from my own sweat and savings. This Victorian house in Portland's Hawthorne district isn't just where I work. It's my sanctuary, my achievement, my proof that hard work pays off. I never thought my own parents would walk into my office and try to hand it over to my younger sister like my 3 years of renovation meant nothing. Last month, my parents called asking to meet at the house. They still couldn't call it my home office even after all this time. I thought maybe they wanted to finally see what I'd accomplished, maybe even apologize for years of putting my sister first. But when they sat down in my newly finished conference room with my sister Emma and her twin boys, I knew something was wrong. My father straightened his tie and said, "We've been thinking. Emma needs stability for the boys more than you need this big house for just yourself." My world tilted. My sister just smiled, like she was already picking out new furniture. Her 9-year-old twins, Jake and Tyler, were running around my office, grabbing my design awards off the shelves like they were toys. What my parents didn't know was that I'd discovered something about Emma's real plans for this house. Something that would change everything. Stick around, because what I uncovered will shock you as much as it shocked them. Have you ever had your family dismiss your hard work? Tell me about it in the comments below. Growing up in Portland, I learned early that being the older sister meant being invisible. My parents, David and Susan Martinez, owned a small accounting firm downtown. They worked long hours, coming home exhausted and short-tempered. Emma was born when I was 6, and suddenly their tired faces would light up whenever she gurgled or took a step. I became the responsible one, the one who didn't need attention. Emma was their miracle baby. That's what they called her. She had these big brown eyes and curly hair that strangers would stop to admire. I had straight hair and thick glasses, always reading in corners while Emma performed little dances for our parents' clients. "Look how talented she is," they'd say, recording her every move. My art project stayed on the refrigerator for maybe a week before getting replaced by Emma's latest masterpiece. When I was 10, I started drawing floor plans of houses I'd design someday. I'd spend hours sketching room layouts, dreaming of spaces that felt warm and welcoming. My parents barely glanced at them, but when Emma colored outside the lines at age 4, they hung it in their office and told everyone she was the next Picasso. The favoritism got worse as we grew up. Emma got ballet lessons, piano lessons, art camp every summer. I got library cards and told to entertain myself. When she wanted a new bike, they bought her a pink one with streamers and a bell. When mine got stolen, they said I should have been more careful and made me save up for a used one. High school was brutal. Emma joined every club, ran for student council, dated the popular kids. My parents went to every game where she cheered, every play where she had a small part. I was editor of the school newspaper, won state competitions for graphic design, got accepted to Portland State with a partial scholarship. They said they were proud, but they never came to my award ceremonies. They were too busy driving Emma to auditions for community theater. The real wake-up call came when I was 17. Our grandmother, Rosa Martinez, got sick with cancer. She lived alone in this beautiful 1920s Victorian house in Hawthorne, surrounded by gardens she'd tended for 40 years. While Emma was at cheerleading practice, I'd spend afternoons with Grandma Rosa, listening to her stories about immigrating from Mexico, about building a life in Portland when no one wanted to hire Latino workers. She taught me about the house, how to fix the old radiators, where the original hardwood was hiding under ugly carpet, which walls were load-bearing. "This house has good bones, mija," she'd say, running her weathered hands along the crown molding. "It just needs someone who sees its potential." My parents visited maybe twice a month, usually bringing Emma, who'd sit on her phone the whole time. I was there almost every day, helping Grandma Rosa with groceries, medications, doctor's appointments. We'd sit in her kitchen drinking café con leche, and she'd tell me about her dreams of turning the house into something special, maybe an art studio or a place where creative people could work. When she passed away 2 years ago, I was holding her hand. Emma was at a party. My parents were in Seattle at some conference. The last thing Grandma Rosa said to me was, "Promise me you'll save this house, Rebecca. Don't let them tear it down." The funeral was surreal. Emma gave this tearful speech about how much she'd loved Grandma Rosa, how she'd learned so much from her. I wanted to scream. She'd barely spent 5 hours total with our grandmother in her final year. But everyone ate it up, talking about how sweet and sensitive Emma was. After the funeral, we learned that Grandma Rosa had left the house to all four of us, me, Emma, and our parents, as joint owners. It needed major work. The roof leaked, the plumbing was ancient, and the electrical system was dangerous. My parents took one look and said they wanted to sell it, split the money 4 ways. But I had a different vision. I offered to buy out their shares, use the house as my home office, and restore it to its former glory. They seemed skeptical. "It's a lot of work for someone your age," my father said. My mother added, "Maybe we should just sell to developers and be done with it." Emma, surprisingly, signed over her share right away. She was living in Seattle, then working as a bartender and dating some guy in a band. She needed quick cash more than a fixer-upper in Portland. "Take it," she said. "I don't want to deal with renovation headaches." I borrowed against my freelance income, took out a small business loan, and bought them all out. The house was mine. Finally, something that belonged to me alone. The renovation took 3 years of my life. I learned plumbing on YouTube, hired contractors for the major electrical work, spent weekends stripping wallpaper and refinishing floors. I turned the front parlor into my main office, the dining room into a client meeting space, and the upstairs bedrooms into storage and a cozy workspace for late-night projects. Every morning, I'd wake up in my small apartment across town and drive to my house. I love saying that. I'd make coffee in the restored kitchen, then work in rooms filled with natural light streaming through windows I'd personally cleaned and recalked. My graphic design business took off. Clients loved meeting in this beautiful, creative space. I was featured in Portland Home and Garden magazine as a young entrepreneur, bringing new life to historic properties. My parents never visited during construction. They'd ask how it was going, but in the same tone, they'd ask about the weather. Emma had moved back to Portland last year after her relationship imploded, but she was too busy with her own drama to care about my project. Then, 2 months ago, everything changed. Emma showed up at my office unannounced, twin boys in tow. I barely recognized them. Jake and Tyler had grown so much since I'd last seen them. They were polite kids, but clearly restless in my carefully organized space. Emma looked tired, stressed, older than her 26 years. "Nice place," she said, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. "Grandma Rosa would have loved what you did with it." I offered them coffee and juice boxes, thinking this was just a sisterly catch-up. But Emma's visit felt different. She kept asking questions about the house. How much it was worth now. Whether I'd ever considered renting out rooms. If I planned to live there eventually. "It's just so big for one person," she said, watching the boys play with my design samples. "Seems like a waste." I brushed off her comments, but they stuck with me. A week later, she came by again, this time with a sob story about her landlord raising the rent. She was working as a server at a downtown restaurant, barely making ends meet as a single mom. The boy's father, Marcus, had disappeared after their second birthday, leaving her with no support. "I'm drowning, Rebecca," she said, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." My heart went out to her. Despite our complicated history, she was my sister, and those boys were my nephews. I offered to help her find a better apartment, maybe co-sign a lease, but that wasn't what she wanted. "What if we moved in here temporarily?" she asked. "Just until I get back on my feet? There's so much space, and the boys would love having a yard to play in." I hesitated. This house was my sanctuary, my professional space. But Emma pressed on, painting a picture of family togetherness, of the boys getting to know their aunt, of sharing the burden of maintaining such a big property. Against my better judgment, I said yes to a temporary arrangement, 2 weeks maximum, just until she found something else. That was 6 weeks ago. Emma and the boys never left. At first it seemed manageable. Emma set up air mattresses in my former storage room, and the boys shared what used to be my quiet workspace upstairs. But temporary quickly became permanent in her mind. She stopped looking at apartment listings, started talking about enrolling the boys in neighborhood schools. Worse, she began treating my office like her personal hangout space. I'd come in to find her on client calls, using my business line to chat with friends. The boys, sweet as they were, didn't understand boundaries. They'd color on my design presentations, spill juice on client contracts, use my expensive art supplies for craft projects. I tried to have gentle conversations about timelines and boundaries, but Emma always had an excuse. The apartments she looked at were too expensive, too small, in bad neighborhoods. "Just a little longer," she'd say. "I'm so close to getting that promotion at work." But I noticed she wasn't working extra shifts anymore. She'd sleep until noon while I tried to have professional meetings downstairs, her boys running around in their pajamas. My business was suffering. Clients started commenting on the family atmosphere, and not in a good way. 3 weeks ago, Emma dropped the bomb that changed everything. "I've been thinking," she said over breakfast in my kitchen. "What if this arrangement became permanent? The boys love it here, and you seem less stressed with family around." I nearly choked on my coffee. Less stressed? I hadn't slept through the night in weeks. My productivity had tanked. My carefully cultivated professional environment had become a daycare center. "Emma, this is my business," I said carefully. "I need this space to work." She waved her hand dismissively. "You can work anywhere. The boys need stability. Besides, it's what Grandma Rosa would have wanted. Family living in her house." That comment stung because I knew our grandmother better than anyone, and she'd specifically wanted this house to be a creative space, not a crash pad for my sister's latest crisis. But Emma wasn't done. The next day, she started rearranging furniture, moving my office supplies to make room for the boys' toys. When I objected, she said we needed to compromise since we were sharing the space now. Sharing? I'd bought this house, renovated it, built my business here. Nothing about this was sharing. That's when I knew I had to act. I called my parents, hoping they'd talk sense into Emma. Instead, they sided with her completely. "She's struggling," my mother said. "You have so much space and it's just you. Can't you sacrifice a little for family?" My father was blunter. "Your sister needs help, and you're being selfish. That house is too big for one person anyway." Their words transported me back to childhood. Me being called selfish for wanting my own bike, my own birthday party, my own recognition. Nothing had changed. Emma was still the priority, and I was still expected to give up whatever she wanted. But I wasn't a kid anymore. I'd built something real, something valuable, something mine. I wasn't about to let it go without a fight. That's when my parents called the meeting that started this whole story. They wanted to make Emma's takeover official. The morning of our family meeting, I cleaned my office one more time, hoping against hope that they'd see what I'd built and understand why it mattered. I'd prepared talking points about my business growth, the clients I served, the investment I'd made in the property. When they arrived, my parents in their matching sweaters, Emma with her practiced look of grateful desperation, the boys carrying backpacks full of toys. I felt that familiar childhood anxiety, but underneath it was something new: anger. We sat in my conference room, the one I'd designed for important client meetings. My father pulled out a folder of documents while my mother arranged cookies she'd brought, like this was a social call. "We've been discussing Emma's situation," my father began, "and we think the best solution is for her and the boys to stay here permanently. You can find a smaller place, maybe a regular apartment. This house is really more suitable for a family." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "The boys need a yard, good schools, stability. You're young and single. You can live anywhere." I stared at them, feeling like I was underwater. This house wasn't just my office. It was my life's work, my grandmother's legacy, my proof that I could create something beautiful and meaningful. "This is my business," I said, voice steady despite my racing heart. "I can't just pick up and move my whole operation." Emma spoke up, her voice sickeningly sweet. "We could share it. You could use one room as an office, and we'd use the rest for living. It would be like having a built-in babysitter for the boys." Built-in babysitter. That's what I was to her. Free labor, free housing, free everything. My father slid the documents across the table. "We've had a lawyer draw up papers transferring ownership. It's really the most practical solution." I picked up the papers, my hands shaking. They'd gone behind my back, planned this whole thing without my input. The documents would sign over my house, the house I'd bought from them, renovated with my own money, built my business in, to Emma. "I need time to think about this," I managed to say. My mother looked disappointed. "What's to think about? It's family. Family helps family." But as I looked at Emma, something clicked. Her expression wasn't grateful or apologetic. It was calculating. She'd planned this. Maybe not from the beginning, but somewhere along the way, she'd decided my house would solve all her problems, and my parents, as always, were happy to sacrifice my stability for her convenience. After they left, I sat in my conference room, staring at those papers. I thought about calling them back, signing over my house to keep the peace. It would be easier. It's what the old Rebecca would have done. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd spent 3 years learning to stand up for myself, building something that was mine alone. I wasn't about to give it up without knowing exactly what I was dealing with. That's when I decided to do some investigating. If Emma was scheming, I was going to find out. The next morning, while Emma was sleeping and the boys were at day camp, I started digging. I called Emma's former landlord, pretending to be a reference check for a new apartment. What I learned made my blood run cold. Emma hadn't been evicted for late rent. She'd been evicted for property damage, specifically for letting the boys draw on walls and ruin carpets, then refusing to pay for repairs. The landlord said she'd been living there rent-free for 3 months, claiming financial hardship while spending money on new clothes and dinners out. I called her restaurant next, asking to speak with her about catering for a client event. The manager told me Emma had been fired 2 weeks ago for showing up late and being rude to customers. She wasn't working at all anymore, but the real kicker came when I searched her social media accounts. Emma had been posting about her new house for weeks, showing off pictures of my living room and kitchen like she owned them. She'd tagged the location and everything, calling it her fresh start and her blessing. One post made me physically sick. "Finally have space for my boys to grow up. Sometimes you have to be patient and trust that family will come through." Blessed posture new beginnings, chapter house goals. She'd been planning this takeover from day one. The sob story, the temporary arrangement, the boys' attachment to the house. It was all calculated to make me feel guilty about taking back what was mine. But I needed more evidence. I called my cousin Jennifer, who's a paralegal in Seattle. She helped me research public records and found something interesting. Emma had defaulted on student loans, owed back taxes, and had creditors looking for her. She wasn't just broke. She was hiding from debt. My house wasn't just a convenient place to live, it was her escape plan. Armed with this information, I knew I couldn't just kick her out. She'd run straight to my parents with more sob stories, and they'd pressure me to be understanding. I needed a different approach. I called a family meeting of my own. This time, I chose the location, a quiet cafe in Hawthorne, away from my house and Emma's dramatic staging. I invited my parents and Emma, but arranged for the boys to be at day camp. This conversation needed to happen without tiny witnesses. I arrived early, ordering coffee and laying out printed copies of everything I'd discovered: the eviction notice, the employment records, the social media posts, the debt information. My hands were steady now. I wasn't the scared little girl anymore, hoping for scraps of attention. I was a business owner protecting her investment. When they arrived, I could see Emma's confidence falter. She'd expected another guilt trip session, another chance to manipulate the narrative. My parents looked tired, probably dreading more family drama. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Before we talk about the house," I said, sliding the documents across the table, "I think you should know what Emma's really been doing." My father picked up the eviction notice, his eyebrows raising. My mother read the employment termination letter, her face growing pale. Emma tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "You lied about being evicted for high rent," I said, looking directly at Emma. "You destroyed your last apartment and refused to pay for damages. You lied about working. You were fired weeks ago for poor performance. And you've been posting pictures of my house online, telling people it's yours." Emma's face turned red. "You investigated me? Your own sister?" "My sister who was trying to steal my house," I replied calmly. "Yes, I investigated." My parents looked between us, confusion and disappointment warring on their faces. My father set down the papers. "Emma, is this true?" She tried to deflect, tears starting to flow. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. The boys need stability. "The boys need a mother who takes responsibility," I interrupted. "Not one who manipulates family members and lies to cover her mistakes." My mother, who'd been silent, finally spoke. "Emma, you told us Rebecca was being unreasonable. You said she was trying to kick you and the boys onto the street." "She was," Emma protested. "I asked for a little more time, and she started making unreasonable demands about boundaries and professional space. It's just a house." That phrase, "just a house," broke something loose in me. "It's not just a house," I said, my voice rising. "It's Grandma Rosa's legacy. It's 3 years of my life, my savings, my business. It's the first thing I've ever owned that was truly mine. And you want to take it because you can't face the consequences of your own choices." I turned to my parents. "This is the same pattern from childhood. Emma makes bad decisions. I'm expected to sacrifice to fix them. She wanted my bike. You made me share. She needed money. You gave her my inheritance from Grandma Rosa's jewelry. She wants my house. You pressure me to give it up." My father looked startled. "What inheritance from jewelry?" I laughed bitterly. "The antique ring and necklace Grandma Rosa left me. Emma convinced you I was too young to have expensive jewelry, so you sold it and put the money in her college fund. Did you forget? Or did you just hope I would?" The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged glances, memory and guilt flickering across their faces. Emma stared at her hands, caught in her own web of lies. "I won't sign those papers," I said firmly. "Emma needs to find her own housing, get a job, and take responsibility for her life. The boys are welcome to visit me anytime, but I won't enable their mother's destructive patterns anymore." My mother tried one last appeal. But Rebecca, she's family. Families help each other. Real families do, I agreed. They don't lie, manipulate, and steal from each other. Emma has been using all of us, especially me. I'm done. I stood up, leaving the evidence on the table. Emma, you have 1 week to move out. I'll help you find resources for single mothers, job placement services, whatever you need to get back on your feet, but I won't give you my house. Emma's tears turned to anger. You're destroying this family, she shouted. What's wrong with you? Why can't you just help? I've been helping, I said calmly. I let you stay for 6 weeks. I fed your children, provided housing, watched them while you slept in. But helping doesn't mean giving up everything I've worked for. I looked at my parents one final time. You raised us to believe that love means sacrifice, but you only ever asked one of us to sacrifice. I'm 32 years old, and I'm tired of being the invisible daughter who's expected to give up her dreams so Emma can avoid consequences. Walking out of that cafe felt like shedding an old skin. My phone buzzed with texts from my mother, pleading for me to reconsider. I turned it off. The next week was difficult. True to form, Emma tried every manipulation tactic she knew. She brought the boys to my office to say goodbye, hoping their tears would change my mind. She posted on social media about being abandoned by family and homeless with children. She even sent mutual friends to guilt-trip me about my selfishness. But I held firm. I helped her apply for emergency housing assistance, connected her with job placement services, even offered to pay for the boys' school supplies once she was settled. What I wouldn't do was sacrifice my life's work for her poor planning. My parents were cold for a while, disappointed that I wouldn't keep the family together. But as weeks passed and Emma continued making poor choices, including getting involved with another unreliable guy and missing job interviews, they began to see the patterns I'd pointed out. 6 months later, Emma is living in a subsidized apartment across town, working part-time at a call center. The boys are adjusting well to their new school and seem happier with more structure in their lives. She still complains about money and sends occasional guilt trip messages, but I've learned to set boundaries. My business has thrived since reclaiming my space. I've expanded into brand consulting, hired 2 part-time assistants, and been featured in several design magazines. Last month, I bought the house next door and am converting it into additional office space. My parents and I have started family dinners again, but the dynamic is different. They see me as an adult now, not just Emma's responsible older sister. It took 32 years, but I finally have their respect. Looking back, I realized the hardest part wasn't standing up to Emma or my parents. It was recognizing that I deserved to protect what I'd built. For years, I'd been conditioned to believe that being a good person meant giving up my needs for others. But real love, the kind Grandma Rosa showed me, doesn't require you to destroy yourself. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. My house still stands in Hawthorne, more beautiful than ever. Every room tells the story of someone who refused to give up on herself. And in my office, hanging above my desk, is a photo of Grandma Rosa in her garden, smiling like she knew I'd keep my promise to save our house. To anyone listening who's been asked to sacrifice their dreams for someone else's convenience, you don't have to. Your hard work matters. Your boundaries matter. You matter. And sometimes, the family you build through respect and boundaries is stronger than the family you're born into. That house isn't just my office anymore. It's my proof that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's survival.